This is called an in-office activation, So what is an in-office activation? Well, it's how to turn your patient's visitors into new patients. How to turn your patient's visitors into new patients. That's a source of new patients. Matter of fact, it's one of the best sources, and you're going to see why right now. And the first thing you have to do is you have to see opportunity. If you can't see opportunity, you won't be able to take advantage of it. So the very first thing you have to do is be able to see it. So all of your patients' visitors, in other words, when you see every and anybody on the street, in a theater, in a restaurant, in your office, anywhere, they fit in the S-curve of economics. Therefore, they're a potential new patient. So let's walk through how this works. And you have to kind of think this way. You go, okay, let's break it down. So the first thing is you have to realize is it's essentially broken into three categories. When you see any person, whether it's a visitor with one of your patients or anybody else, they're going to fit into one of three categories in the S-curve of economics. The first category is 8% of those people will be looking for a chiropractor in the next 12 months. That's 8% utilization. Now, the bad news is there's a slim chance that today is the day out of 365 days they're looking for a chiropractor. That's so 8% is a smaller number. And then today is the day they're looking for a chiropractor. That alone is a small number. And that's why you cannot wait around for the 8% of people to call you. Okay, so that's one perspective. Number two, so that leaves 92% of the population. And remember, 1 in 4 are 25% of those people will not have a gateway chiropractic problem now. Now, there's a couple key words in here. Gateway problem, that's very important. And now. So they may not have it now, but they could totally be a potential new patient tomorrow because life is dynamic. It's constantly changing. So that's like today. I woke up today and my knee was fine. I went out, did a little bit of activity of this or that, strained my knee. Now my knee hurts. So this morning I was not a candidate for being a new patient for a knee problem. Right now I am. This is how fast things change. Life is dynamic. That's what happens with these problems. So the gateway problems, of course, with chiropractic are the back pain, neck pain, joint pain, arthritis, old injuries, car injuries, neuromusculoskeletal, primarily spinal. Okay. So 1 in 4 people will not have a gateway problem. They'll have different problems. They may be overweight, diabetes, heart disease, whatever. But you cannot violate gateways and paradigm shifts because that naturally creates the defensive resistance. So it doesn't matter if somebody says, oh yeah, I got diabetes, and then you talk about how you can help them and you're a chiropractor. That is a natural defensive position. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with out of 92% of the people, 1 in 4 of them not having a problem. So I'm going to find out real quick. It's unbelievably easy to find out real quick if somebody has a gateway problem. I'm going to ask essentially 2 questions. That's it. And I'm going to know real fast. Okay, so you will not be able to. Now, that person, we don't waste any time on if they do not have a gateway. If we go to the gateways and we go past the second resistance and they do not have a gateway, we leave them alone. We are not going to waste any time or money or energy. Nothing. You will not be able to acquire that person as a new patient. Move on. So understand these different segments is unbelievably vital. Now that leaves the 75% out of the 92%. Well, 3 out of 4 of that 92% or 75% will have a chiropractic gateway problem to some degree right now. However, they're not looking for a chiropractor. Now, again, why do we know that there's this large number of people out there that have these gateway problems? Well, if you look at only back pain, that's it, only. I'm not even talking about neck pain, joint pain, arthritis, old car, nothing. I'm just talking about low back pain. It's the second leading cause of going to the emergency room. Cars are driving by your office every day going to the emergency room for low back pain. It's the second leading cause of going to a general practitioner. So you can look at all the general practitioners in your hometown and realize that they're getting new patients every day with low back pain. They're driving right by your office. General practitioners see more patients with low back pain than chiropractors. That's a fact. That's a statistical fact. That's called potential is what that's called. It's the back pain is the second workers' compensation injury, and NSAIDs, the number one reason people take NSAIDs is for joint pain. 1 in 5 people have arthritis joint pain, which is obviously a chiropractic problem. So you have this massive amount of people. So in other words, if you can't see that, you'll never be able to tap into it. You have to look at this market and go, and of whoever you're looking at, that individual person, 5 people, 10 people, 100, whatever, you have to realize there's essentially 3 segments. The first segment is 8% of those are going to be looking for a chiropractor within a year. Okay. 92% of them are not. Out of the 92%, 25% do not have a problem. You can't get those. But 3 out of 4 out of the 92% will. Now, that number represents 68% of the population versus 8%. So where would you rather spend time and energy? Paying attention to 68% or 8%? That's the potential of the market, 68%. So now, out of that 3 out of 4, we're going to break it down a little further. And you got to be aware of this. 10% of the 75% will have high need. What does that mean? It means that they're going to be easier to get. What's the good and bad news about that? They're going to be easier to get. They have a higher need. What's the bad news? It's only 10%. So when you talk to the 92%, 1 in 4 won't have a problem. Out of the 3 or 4 left, only 10% of those are going to have a high need, and it's going to be easy. You got to be aware of this. 10% will have low need. What does that mean? They're going to be they're going to be hardest. They're the hardest people to get right there. The 10% of the 75% that have low need. That's the hardest one. They're very difficult. You got to be really, really good. The good news is 80% of the 75% have average need. And you just have to apply the educational formula. And the educational sales formula to get them as patients is establish need, minimize the obstacles of money, minimize the obstacles of time. And if it's in a trusted relationship, you significantly just increase your likelihood of getting that business. So what does that mean to your patients, visitors? Because we all treat patients. And how many times throughout a day, there's probably, if you're seeing at least over, I'd say 10 patients a day, I will guarantee you have at least 1, 2, or 3 visitors coming in with those new patients. Now, who am I talking about when I say visitors? It could be their spouse. It could be their mother, father, brother, sister, best friend, girlfriend, boyfriend, kids. In other words, there's always people coming with and moving through, because people, on the way to and from the chiropractor's office, they're going to the grocery store, to the soccer match, whatever. So it'd be interesting if you actually knew that number, because that is in most offices, that's a decent little sizable number. That might be 20, 30, or 40 people. And remember that those 20, 30, or 40 people in a month, they fit into this S-curve of economics. And when you look at the formula, you've already got 1 in 4 of the categories taken care of. You already have the trust category taken care of. They're there with your patient. They wouldn't be there with your patient if there was no trust. So and it's not just a little trust. There's going to be a large degree of trust there. This is very important relative to how much easier it is to get these people as patients. So the trust category is at the highest. That's great. Where's the need category? Well, we know it's 68% of the people. Essentially 68% when you do the numbers and you filter it out. The 8%, the 92%, the 1 in 4, or 3 out of 4, it's about 68% of your guests fit into the category of having a problem to some degree. So there is a chiropractic problem there to some degree, okay? All we have to do is establish the need, minimize the obstacles of time or money, and because the trust is already there. So your patient's visitors already have 2 out of 4 with high probability. 2 out of the 4. Trust and a 68% of them having a gateway. You have a real high probability patient that came into your waiting room. Unfortunately, most chiropractors don't even know it. These patients come in with family members and friends of your patients. They sit in the waiting room. Your staff members talk to them while they're sitting in the waiting room. You treat the patient, and then the patient leaves, and they leave with your potential new patient, and you didn't even know it. That's terrible. That's not going to happen again.